Let's crank this out and rock and roll.
Yo, let's crank this out. 1, 2, 3. Ready? Oh, together.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. This
Hi.
is Pastor Adam.
And this is Pastor Kent.
And we are here to tell you about something extremely exciting that's happening during the months of July and August. Tell them, Adam.
During the 8 and 9:30 service, don't forget our new summer times, 8, 9:30, and 11. During the 8 and 9:30, we want to see you over at the new Grace City venue, the old American Shoe Shop across the street.
Here it is.
It's just that easy.
So easy. Right here, super, super simple. You know what we're gonna do here? We are gonna make it happen. And this is an option for you. Come on in.
So what's going to be happening here during the 8 and 9:30 service, Pastor Kent?
We are gonna do food, sermon, and discussion. Explain that a little bit, Adam.
So when you come in, we're going to have some local food options, kind of a hangout, fellowship time. Pastor Kent and myself will be here, a chance to just greet one another, meet some folks, maybe a little more intimate setting. Then we'll drop into the sermon, watching on those cool TVs, live stream from right across the street at the Pack.
Yes, while it's happening there, it's happening here. And then when it's over, we'll have maybe 15 minutes or so to have a discussion.
Join us this summer at the Shoe Shop.
Boom!
Here's my fundamental conviction. You are a leader because I define leadership as influence. And every one of you in this room has influence over someone. It may be one person, 2 people, 3 people, 100, 1,000. It's probably more than you know, but everyone here has been given some measure of influence, which means you're a leader. Which means as a leader, you'll be tested. And you'll be challenged, because what the enemy wants to do is suppress your leadership and suppress your influence or limit your influence or taint your influence so that your influence is evil, your influence is foolish, your influence is fleshly, your influence is toward the world and not to Jesus. And so as a leader, which all of you are, one of my calling, one of my passions is to help you as a leader step into the greatness that God has called you to. And to call out greatness in you that you may not even know is there, given by God. As a man, as a woman, as a boy, as a girl, made in the image of God, there is greatness and potential in you that you have yet to even begin to wildly imagine or fulfill. And part of what Jesus does is when he comes and we encounter Jesus, he begins helping us tap into life, he said. I'll give you life to the full. And so as a leader, you will face many, many challenges, and one of my passions is to help you step into those challenges so that you respond to them well. But here's the kicker. There is one challenge that you face as a leader that is greater than any other challenge you will ever face. And if you do not recognize that challenge and step into and through that challenge, you will never be the kind of leader worth following. And I want to qualify that because there are a lot of leaders if you look around. There are a lot of guys with a lot of juice. There are a lot of gals with a lot of gifts and talents, and they got people following them and leading them and believing them, but that does not necessarily mean that they are biblically qualified to be called a great leader or to be a leader worth following. And the kind of leader that I want you to be is a great leader and a leader worth following, which means you have to recognize and you have to identify and you have to address this leadership challenge. It is the singular leadership challenge that determines everything else in your life. but I'm not going to tell you what it is until the end. So there we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at 3 marks of great leaders in the life of Mordecai and Esther. And the reason we're going to do that is because in this chapter, a change happens and we see them exercising the kind of leadership that's worth emulating and following. And this is why that's good news, because that was not always the case with them, was it? They have not been leaders worth emulating and following for most of the story, right? They're lying, they're compromising, they're cowering, they're hiding their identity as a child of God. They're making poor decisions and they're living with the pagans, like the pagans, and they're living actively in sin. They have not been someone that you want to hold up and go, now there's a great leader, follow them. And yet we have seen in these few chapters a transformation begin to take place, which should be very encouraging to all of us here in the room, because none of us started out as a leader worth following. But by God's grace, we can become something we never were. We can become someone we never thought possible. We can, by God's grace, be transformed into something and someone more beautiful than we ever thought possible because of the grace of God through Jesus Christ. And so one of the big takeaways that we're not even going to talk about is like, how amazing is it that we can even talk about what they're doing in an exemplary way? Like, hey, that's good, we should do that. Meaning you've never disqualified yourself from being used by God as a great leader. There's always faith in future grace for you and for your life. So 3 marks of a great leader that we'll look at here in the life of Mordecai and Esther in Esther chapter 8. Number 1, when a great leader faces a test, they respond with selfless courage. When a great leader faces a test, they respond with selfless courage. A couple presuppositions going under this observation that I want to put on the table here. A, if you're a leader, you will be tested. B, where are you currently being tested? If you don't think you're being tested or in a test right now, it's not because you're not being tested, it's because you're probably not paying attention. We're always our leadership is always being tested. The question is not, am I, but how am I responding to it? And furthermore, how many tests do you pass that you don't even know you're taking? Not many. And so part of the goal is to wake up to the reality that whether you're 5, 15, 50, or 85, you are currently in some form of leadership test. What is it, and how are you doing? And so that's what I want you to be thinking about as we move through this passage. But mark of a great leader, number 1, is that when they face a test, they respond with selfless courage. Now, where am I getting that? Esther chapter 8, verse 1. Here we go. That same day, King Xerxes gave Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Now, backstory here real quick, if you haven't been tracking to date, right? King Xerxes, most powerful man on the planet. Haman, bad dude who enacted a horrible edict to annihilate all of the Jews. Esther, who's a Jew and married to King Xerxes. He doesn't know she's a Jew because she's been hiding that. Mordecai, her cousin, who raised her as an orphan, is part of the mix here too. So a chapter previous in chapter 7, remember, she stepped courageously into her calling and opportunity, revealed herself as a Jew, and asked King Xerxes to deal with the threat of Haman. And the pride of Haman led him to his great fall. He is now nailed to the pole that he had put in his backyard for Mordecai. That's where we're at in the story. So at this point in the story, Esther's life and Mordecai's life have been spared. And that's what's going to present this test, actually. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed Mordecai over Haman's estate. So let's just make sure we know what's going on here, okay? Esther was pretty sure her life was going to be forsaken when she revealed that she was a Jew and that she had lied to him about her ethnicity. And she was pretty sure that if he didn't kill her for that he would kill her for making the ask of going back on his word when he signed the edict into law that any Persian could kill any Jew on one day in December, if it works out to be a few months from this moment in time. And yet she reveals herself as a Jew. She makes the request for her life to be spared, and the king responds, and he kills Haman. Now Esther's worst nightmare and most evil enemy is hanging dead on a pig pole in his backyard, and the ring got taken off his lifeless finger and given to her cousin Mordecai. It's Fat City. There is the imminent threat to her life is done. And the temptation in this moment would be for Esther to go, Okay, let's just step back here. Let's just rethink this whole thing. I took a risk, gave it my best shot. Things kind of worked out here. I mean, my life is spared. My head's still attached to my body, which is always a plus. The king apparently still likes me and has favor with me. He gave my cousin, which is kind of like my adopted dad, like Jeff Bezos and like Bill Gates' estates combined. It's like this is a big deal. Like he's got Haman's palace now, and all the riches that come with that, and the servants that come with that, and the prestige that comes with that, and I can go over there and use the pool anytime I want. This is working out pretty good. And what she could have done is gone, you know what? I think we'll just stop here. Let's not push it. Let's not press our luck. I'm surprised we got this far. Let's just be happy that I'm going to walk away alive. Thanks be to God. And we'll just pray for the rest of the Jews. But see, when a great leader is faced with a test, they respond to it with selfless courage. Look what happens next. Again, meaning for a second time, Esther pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she rose and stood before him. What's the significance of putting that in the story? When was the last time the king extended the scepter? When she came illegally before him without being called or requested or appointed to come, which means anyone who comes into the presence of the king without an appointment is immediately to have their head separated from their body, which has a tendency to frustrate walk-ins, okay? You just kind of lower your walk-in appointments when you have that rule in place. I've thought about putting that rule in place at our office, but it'd be tough to get away with, so we can't do it, but no, I'm totally kidding. So she walks in before the king, and she violates law, capital offense. He extends the gold scepter, meaning I release you from the consequence of disobeying this law, and I'll let you live. Now, when she throws herself at his feet again, she is again putting her life at stake. Otherwise, he would not have needed to extend the gold scepter to say, okay, I'm going to let you live again. Meaning what? Meaning Esther had put her life at stake on the line one time, and it went pretty well. And she could have easily stopped there. But when a great leader faces a real test, they respond with selfless courage. And I'm telling you what, it wasn't self-centered cowardice that drove her to do this. It was a selfless kind of courage that is second to none. Look what happens. If it pleases the king, she said, and if he regards me with favor and thinks it the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, then let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family? Here's what we see Esther doing. Now that the threat of her own life has been removed, she's not acting now for herself. She's putting herself in harm's way for the sake of another. And here's what I want us to see. Fear is you being a false prophet. That was a weird pivot. How did we get there? Here's what I mean. To date, Esther had not been acting selflessly and courageously because she feared the outcomes that she thought were sure. If I do this, if I say that, if I act in that way, if I stand up for that thing, I will die. What's that doing? That's as a finite person making a sure statement about a future event that they cannot know will happen, which means they are being a prophet, and in this sense, she was a false prophet. How many of you here know exactly with precision what will happen to you tomorrow? No one raise your hand, just helping you out here, don't embarrass yourself. Nobody. And yet we live constantly with stress and anxiety that comes from fear about tomorrow because we've played out a narrative as a false prophet thinking we know what's going to happen. It's shocking to think about how much energy you've expended over things that are not reality and will never come to reality. You're just projecting them as reality. We're going to see here at the end of this story, Everything changes, and yet nothing changes. And yet all of the stress that people went through, thinking we're going to die, we're going to live, we're going to die, we're going to live, and like nothing really changed except their perception of what might happen in the future. So question, what kind of anxiety or fear are you living from right now based on a false prophet projection of the future that you've made up in your head? You can't know what tomorrow's going to hold. I don't care how smart you are or how clear the cards are. It's in the cards, maybe. Now, we use wisdom, of course, and we use reason, we use counsel, yes, but the reality of it is, I don't know if I'll ever preach another sermon or even finish this one. Just don't. And yet Esther, because she thought she knew what would happen in the future if she acted in faith rather than fear, I think it could be argued that had she acted in faith earlier, we wouldn't even have to get to chapter 8. This whole thing has happened because she's been consistently acting in fear, which brings me to my second observation, which is fear-based postures always lead to sin-filled choices. We're seeing some of the first choices Esther makes based in faith, not fear, and it's an entirely different outcome than she thought was even possible. Fear puts us on our back, faith puts us on our feet. Fear puts us on our heels, faith puts us on our toes. Fear puts us constantly reacting to everything. Faith causes us to be proactive, moving towards something or someone. And so as you reflect on your leadership, what kind of posture is your life? Well, constantly fear, that's not going to work. Well, that'll never work. Well, that's not going to happen. Oh, and are you just constantly like negative Nancy, downer Debbie? Because you're playing out these scenarios in your head that may or may not ever happen? Or are you living an active sort of faith that's stepping into the obedience of faith that Paul calls us to? I don't know what the future's going to hold, but I do know what I'm called to do, and I'm going to do that because I know the one who holds the future. You've never made a single decision from fear that brought glory to Jesus or joy to your soul. Ever. I got an amen from the back. Yes. And so I know to say let's be done with fear is naive because there'll be things that you haven't thought of being afraid of that will come up tomorrow and you'll be in the battle again. But I'm urging us to obey the most repeated command in all the Bible, and that is fear not, for I, God speaking here, am with you. Because a fear-based posture always leads to sin-filled choices. And it's just shocking to see that what Esther thought would happen actually didn't happen. There are miracles of God, and there are lives to be saved and people to be loved and opportunities to see God work waiting for you on the other side of your obedience to Him. And some of you would sacrifice seeing that happen because you're afraid of the cost. And so you're going to play God and think you know what's better, and you're going to steer your own life away from God toward a destiny you think you can control. How stupid could you be? You can't even keep track of your car keys, let alone control your life? You see, that's kind of harsh. I'm trying to wake us up here because from my personal experience, fear plays more into my daily decisions than I give it credit. If I were to be honest, more of my decisions in life are often rooted in fear. Fear of the future, fear of the unknown, fear of somebody or something. And so the invitation is not necessarily to fear less, it's to fear different. To stop fearing man and stop fearing circumstances and start fearing Jesus, the one you'll give an account to at the end of your days. And when you're fearing Jesus, it will change how you live now. So mark number one of a leader is that when they face a test, they respond with selfless courage. And I'll add this, and I hadn't thought about this till this morning, so this is a non-thought-through, probably poorly articulated point, so nobody write this down and just take it with a grain of salt. Let's just group think together for a moment here, okay? But I think there's a connection between cowardliness and pride. So where you're being a coward with your family, or a coward in your finances, or a coward in your relationships, or a coward at work, or a coward in your team, that's connected to you being pride-filled. Because when you're proud, you're either arrogant or you're full of self-pity. Either one is an unrelenting, unblinking focus on self, which means you don't want to act in such a way that might threaten your image or your future. And so you're not free to act selflessly on behalf of others. You're bound to act only on behalf of yourself, which is the definition of bondage. So you can be a big, tough, strapping dude and be an absolute coward. You can be a UFC cage fighter champion and still be a coward because you're only allowed and imprisoned to do things for you, about you. You're not free to be selflessly courageous in the act of serving others, even if it comes at great cost to yourself. You see the connection? And so one of the questions to reflect on is, where am I being a coward? Did your finances and how you give generously to the church, does it reveal a faith-filled, selfless, courageous leader or a self-centered, fear-based coward? How you deal with your relationships. I mean, just walk through all the categories of your life. Is it pride-centered fear, or is it God-centered, selfless courage? Can't be both. Let's keep going, Pastor Josh. Good idea. Here we go. Mark number 2. When a great leader is given authority, they exercise wise discretion. When a great leader is given authority, they exercise it with wise discretion. Where do I get that? Well, look at chapter 8, verse 7. King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther's request and to Mordecai the Jew, because Haman attacked the Jews, and I have given his estate to Esther, and they have impaled him on the pole he set up. Now write another decree in the king's name on behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you. Let me just read that again. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. Now, that's an extraordinary 2 verses. And I know it's 2 verses in a book you may not have read, in an early Sunday morning after a late Saturday night, and you're going, yeah, okay, just get to the point. So I don't know if we can really get there, but let me help us see if I can't get there. What just happened in that moment is an extraordinary, unprecedented exchange of power like none you will ever experience probably in 1,000 lifetimes. Mordecai just went from being a nobody to the guy. He just went from being dirt poor to filthy rich. He just went from having no authority to having more authority than anyone else in the land except the king. When he is given the king's ringlet, he becomes the king's voice. He's now given the king's right of attorney. You now, what you say is what I say, what you do is what I require. You are acting in my behalf, and you have the full authority and power of the largest kingdom on the planet behind your every word. This is like the Attorney General and the Secretary of State and the Vice President and the Speaker of the House roll up into one position. I mean, we can't wildly imagine this kind of power that he just gave Mordecai. And the question is, how will he wield it? How will he use it? Look at verse 9. At once the royal secretaries were summoned. On the 23rd day of the 3rd month, the month of Sivan, they wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers, check it, who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king. That's kind of cool, okay? The king's like, hey, I'd like to tweet a new edict. They're like, sir, that technology is yet to be invented. He's like, great, no problem. Then breed me some fast horses. And so they bred these horses for him, and they're gone. Verse 11, the king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed of the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, which of course just so happens to align with the day when it was open season on all the Jews. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses went out, spurred on by the king's command, An edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. What's happening there? I'll tell you what's happened there. Extraordinary discretion and restraint as an expression of wisdom on the behalf of Mordecai. What would you have done if you were given that kind of raw power and authority to do whatever you want against your enemies, those people who were licking their chops just a few hours earlier at your boat and your wife and your house and your kids and your stuff? What would have you done? What would you have done? It's an extraordinary expression of wisdom in the form of restraint. And this text often gets used to was this just war, or is this holy war, or is this God, approving the annihilation of women, men, and children? And I don't have time to get into that discussion. If you have questions about that, I preached an entire sermon last summer, I believe, under our series called "You Asked For It" on the question of self-defense. But needless to say, what Mordecai did here was not, I don't believe, ungodly, was not unreasonable. What he did was he counteracted an evil command with a just command. And the just command wasn't licensed to the Jews for wanton killing. The command was you can defend yourself against any man, woman, or child that would come against you violently to kill you and take your stuff. And it wasn't as if they met an evil command with an equally evil command. This wasn't vengeance. This wasn't go stick it to them. This was do not respond to evil with evil, but stand your ground and defend yourself if necessary. And we'll see in chapter 9 with Pastor Kyle next week that 500 men fell at the swords of the Jews. And you're like, they killed 500 men. There's no record of them killing women. There's no record of them killing children. But what is recorded is them defending themselves and their family to those evil men that decided to come and try to take something that was not theirs. And here's what's crazy about it. Although 500 sounds like a lot, in a kingdom of 50 million people, that's a drop in the bucket. And I'm not saying every life is invaluable, every life is extraordinarily valuable because it's made in the image of God, but what we see the edict did was that it communicated something. And what it communicated is that the king is no longer supporting this heinous, evil act of annihilation. And what happens is in the people, then we'll see in a moment, is that it caused great peace and celebration to come to the land when justice is being enacted. But I don't think the big idea in the text here that I want to make right now is whether or not this was a just war or this is a warranted holy war or not. The point I want to make is simply this. Authority given to you as a leader does not build your character. It reveals it. If you're waiting to be given authority to work on your character, it will be too late. Because what authority does is not build your character, it reveals the character that's already there. It's going to expose the kind of character already there. So if you have weak-kneed character, what's not going to make them stronger is more weight. That will break them. And so the time to be building your character is not after you've been given authority, but before. Which means young men, right now, if you want to be a person who's in authority, you better start working on your character. Young ladies, you want to be a person that's entrusted with authority by God, you better act in such a way now that's trustworthy of authority. Which means for the young people here, and actually for every person here, you'll never be safe in authority if you're not good under authority. Because if you're not being godly in submission to authority, you're not worthy of being authority yourself because you'll abuse it. So what's the lesson we're learning here? When a great leader is given authority, they exercise wise discretion. So the question becomes then, where do you have authority, and over who do you have authority, whether it be your marriage, family, parents, I don't know, and how are you exercising it? Mordecai exercised his authority to enact justice to the land, not use it for his own selfish gain. Mark of a great leader number 3. When a great leader is promoted to power, they respond with gracious humility. When a great leader is promoted to power, they respond with gracious humility. Now you may think, well, I haven't been promoted to power. You will be. You say, what do you mean? Well, maybe you're a high school student. What happens when you graduate and go out on your own? You just got promoted. Maybe you're a parent. You got a kid who graduates, and now you have a semi-responsible sort of kind of adult who's going to be making big decisions that will incur debt that you might have to pay for. Guess what? Promotion. You may be a single dude getting ready to get married. Guess what? Promotion. You may be a young couple, getting ready to have a kid. Guess what? Promotion. Life will bring us promotion where we have more responsibilities. The question is, when we have that promotion, will we respond graciously and humbly? Look at how Mordecai responds, chapter 8, verse 15. When Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold and purple robes of fine linen. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration for the Jews. It was a time of happiness and joy and gladness and honor. In every province and in every city to which the edict of the king came, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating, and many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. Now, this is what's so ironic. Haman was reaching for power and never grasped it. Mordecai wasn't looking for power, was given it. Haman wanted royal robes and lost them. Mordecai started the story in dust and ashes and was given the royal robes that Haman so desperately wanted. The story starts with Mordecai and Esther pretending they're not Jews, but rather Persians. The story ends with Persians pretending they're not Persians, but rather Jews. It's crazy. Now, some of the conversions, I'm sure, were genuine. Like, oh my goodness, I want to worship the God of Esther and Mordecai. This is great. But a lot of that was probably like, I'm over on this team because they're in power. Ooh, power shift. I'm over on this team now. But what was universal? Celebration. Look at the language. And the city held a joyous celebration, happiness, joy, gladness, honor. What's going on there? When Haman was promoted to power, they had to order people to bow to him because they intuitively knew he was neither gracious nor humble, which means it's not good for him or us that he's in leadership and power. When Mordecai was promoted to power, instantly the kingdom felt the ripple effect of his wisdom and discretion, so much so that the chaos that Persian Empire had been thrown into because of Haman's decree was now being restored by Mordecai's sense of wisdom and justice, and all the people celebrate because they intuitively knew that this was a man who was gracious in victory and humble of character, which means he's safe to follow, and it's good for us that he's in power. So the question simply becomes, at the point of promotion for you to greater power, how are you, how will you respond? Will you use your power to smite your enemies and to, enact vengeance and to kind of dig it and to make a point? Or will you use gracious, humble, wise restraint and discretion that brings rejoicing to the land because justice is being done? So the question simply is very simple. What kind of leader are you? What kind of leader are you? Now, in answering that question, I believe there are 4 levels or 4 kinds of leaders. And I talk about this in Growth Track, so if you've gone through that, you've probably heard that. But let me just refresh our memories here real quick so you can begin reflecting, right, on your life. The unexamined life isn't worth living. Paul says, examine yourself to see if you're in the faith. So let's just kind of all examine ourselves here for a moment. What kind of leader am I? 4 levels of leadership. The first level is that of power, meaning people follow you because they fear you. Okay? You're bigger, you're stronger, you're more powerful, which means your leadership style is bully. Okay? And there are a lot of leaders that lead like this, and they get a lot of stuff done, but it's a very low grade, low level, low efficiency kind of leadership, meaning the influence and impact will be very, very limited. The second level of leadership is that of position, meaning people follow you because they're forced to. So the first, people follow you because they fear you. The second, people follow you because they're forced to. Both of these leadership styles and levels is normally the highest that anyone ever attains to. If I can get the position that brings the power, I will be there, voila. Now, make no mistake, there are a lot of leaders who have only this level of leadership in their life, and they get a lot done. They get a lot done. They build a lot of stuff. They move a lot of people. They generate a lot of jobs. And this, you don't have to be a great leader to be this kind of leader. But this isn't great leadership. This is just raw leadership. And the next level of leadership is a little harder, and the final is the most hardest, which makes it the most precious and the most valuable. Third level of leadership is performance. People respect you for what you've done. So the authority that you have as a leader comes from your performance or your production. They respect you and they'll follow you because you've done something. Right now, I'm 4 chapters into a book by Phil Knight, an autobiography called Shoe Dog. And I'm reading it not because he's a 4-level leadership for me, but because he's a 3-level leadership. He's done some stuff. I'm reading the book, and I look down, I'm wearing a stupid pair of Nike tennis shoes. I'm like, what he did affects my life. I wear what he did. He produced some things, and so I have respect for that, and I want to learn from him. But that's not the highest level of leadership. The highest, purest, most effective form of leadership, which is also the hardest to attain, is level 4 leadership, which is personhood. People follow you not because they respect what you've done, but they respect who you are. And I say that's the highest level of leadership because that's the leadership level that has the most influence. Because people will let their guard down the most with those they respect the most. Which means you can't influence someone who has their guards up. And you know this intuitively already, and you learned this lesson as a kid. As a kid growing up, your parents exercised one of these 4 levels of leadership. And what level they exercise determined the level of influence you chose and are choosing to allow them to have in your life. If all your parents exercised was raw power and position, I'm your dad, that's what I said, so shut up and do it. They influenced your life. For sure, in pushing you away from any further influence they might have over you. Or maybe your mom, your dad, boy, they got a lot done. Boy, they produced a lot, they performed a lot. I respect, no one can argue that my dad wasn't a go-getter. No one can argue that my mom wasn't talented. Her career, it blossomed. Boy, she really got a lot of stuff done. But then there's the caveat. But I don't know if I would do it the same way myself. But I wouldn't want the life they had. But I don't want to be that kind of dad for my family. Or I would never want to marry a woman like that. Or I never want to become a mom like that. So I respect what they did. I just don't want to become who they were. Or some of you, you're like, yeah, I'm not sure what my dad did at work. I know he's respected there, but I'll tell you one thing. If I could become like anyone when I grew up, it would be my mom or my dad. And that's the purest, highest level of leadership, because at that point, you're actually having influence. Defenses are down, and those people are inviting your influence into their life. And that's the kind of lasting impact that we want to make as leaders, because leadership is, as we've said, influence. Which means every one of you are leaders because every one of you has influence over someone or something. And my guess is you have more leadership influence than you realize or recognize. I'm just a wallflower. I don't say anything. Who you are influences people around you. Which means, parents, the most important thing you could do as a parent is not necessarily what you say, but who you're becoming. Because at the end of the day, what you say won't matter if who you are is different than what you say. You can talk to your blue in the face and rules on the refrigerator and spankings when things go bad and church every Sunday, but if who you are is something completely different from what you're saying, newsflash, your kids will sniff your hypocrisy from a mile away and they'll want nothing to do with you. Which means the first step to being a great leader in your home as a wife or a husband is not first what you do, but it's rather who you're becoming. Which means then that the most important quality of a leader is integrity. We tend to think of leadership as skill-based or education-based or talent-based. Hogwash. There are a lot of skilled, educated, talented leaders out there that are blowing their personal life to smithereens that are not worth following or emulating. They may get a lot of stuff done. Well, that's great. At what expense? Because no one on their deathbed regrets they didn't make more money. Every life of every person I've ever done the funeral for is measured solely with one measurement rod, and that is to the degree at which they gave their life away in the service and love of others, period. And the funerals of those men and women who did not give their life away well in the service of others, they're kind of, let's just get this over with. And their funeral of the lives of those that spend a life giving themselves away in selfless acts of courageous leadership, those are the funerals that we can't ever finish because people want to keep talking. Stories. I've been at funerals of stories for an hour and a half of people telling how this man or this woman selflessly, courageously served them, blessed them, stood up for them, cared for them, loved them, stood in the gap for them, lifted them up out of the mire that the kids had never heard. What an extraordinary legacy. So if integrity is the most important leadership quality, and it is, integrity being who you say you are, whether someone's watching or not, if that is true, then we arrive at the greatest leadership challenge you face. Your greatest leadership challenge is you. Your greatest leadership challenge is you. Not your education, not your family, not your teachers, not your circumstances, not the government. I'm telling you what, we are living in a bizarre victim entitlement culture that someone needs to stand up and say, this is ridiculous. Because newsflash, every foolish decision you ever made, you were there for. Every foolish financial decision you made, every foolish sexual decision you made, every foolish relational decision you made, every foolish marriage decision you ever made, every foolish professional decision you ever made, guess what's the common theme or the connecting thread in all of those foolish decisions? You. There's never been a president that sits in the White House, or a governor that sits in the Capitol, or a teacher that teaches at a school that has done more to mess up your life than you. And there's no one who has more authority to impact the trajectory of your life than you. So where is the greatest leadership challenge you'll face tomorrow? In your bathroom, in the mirror, about 5:30, whenever you get up. If you don't recognize and if you can't deal with that leadership challenge, you're not going anywhere as a leader. Now, here's a definition I gave to our staff about a month ago that I felt was appropriate for this text, and I'll give this to you quickly and then be done. Here's what the leadership definition was I gave to our staff. Leadership, or acts of great leadership, is the vision to see and the courage to make the wise decision. Not the easy decision, not the comfortable decision, not the popular decision, the wise decision. Which means if you're a leader, and you are, and you're called to greatness, which you have been, then to be a great leader, you need the vision to see and the courage to make the right decision. And here's the reality in your life that you'll learn as a leader. You're making 1,000 decisions a day. And every decision affects you first and then everyone else around you. Are you making the right choices? I use vision to see and courage to make because of two reasons. If you have the vision to see the wise decision, but you do not have the courage to make it, no good. If you're a courageous person ready to go, but don't have the wisdom and discernment to see which way to go, no good. You need both. And I'm not sure at what point these two came together, whether or not, Esther couldn't see it or didn't have the courage to act it, but at some point, faith overcame fear and vision overcame blindness, and she saw what she was supposed to do, and she had the courage to do it, and now we get the salvation for an entire people group, which means there are people waiting on the other side of your faith-filled obedience to God. So too, there are people waiting on the other side of that obedience that will be affected if you do not step out in faith. So how do you see the right decision to make? Well, you got to seek counsel. You got to know the Word of God. You got to listen to the Spirit of God. You got to have people in your life of wisdom that can speak into your life. You got to have the working assumption that you won't see everything perfectly. If you walk into a room confident that you have all the answers, you are already 3 steps down the road in the wrong direction. I've told my staff this. I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. A, because I know I'm not. And B, that means I'm not going to see what I need to see. I need you to be better than me and smarter than me so we can help see this together. At the end of the day, I might not got to make the call, but I need your input to make it. You need vision to see and then courage to make the right decisions. How do you get courage? Well, you stop fearing man. You stop fearing the false prophets that you're reading about your life, namely you. You start living a life of faith. Here's 4 fruits of great leadership that I'll just go through quickly here that I think, I gave this to our staff 4 or 5 weeks ago, and again, it just felt so apropos for this text. Fruit of great leadership, number 1, is that people are protected. I told our staff, when you make the right decision because of the vision that God gave you and the courage that He instilled you with, people will feel protected. Isn't that true in this case? Both Jews and Persians felt protected. Oh, we're going to be protected from this heinous act of evil that's going to not only affect the people that we kill, but the people who lived, who enacted that evil act. I mean, this is going to be a stain on our culture that we will not recover from. And when righteousness got into leadership and humility and wisdom and discretion brought justice to the table, people feel protected. Second fruit of great leadership, people are elevated. Meaning because they have been around that leader, they're better off than had they not been around that leader. Which I told our staff, I want to live my life in such a way that you are better because you were around me. You became a better version of who God made you to be because you spent time with me as I became all God called me to be. That's how I want to live my life. I told them, follow me and you will have a living leadership experience. I will be a living leadership experience. We'll learn from my mistakes. We'll celebrate God's graces in the winds, and we'll all learn together. And you should make that same statement to your family. I will be a great leadership experience because I am seeing and I am facing and I am meeting and I am dealing with and responding to the greatest leadership challenge I will ever face in my life, namely moi. Third fruit of great leadership, people are invigorated. I mean, look at this. The entire city of Susa was thrown into a joyous celebration, happiness, joy, gladness, honor. Woo! Just like, this is exciting, this is just, this is right, this is good. We may have a future. Question, are people invigorated around you? Is your wife invigorated? Is your husband invigorated? Are your kids invigorated? Is your team invigorated? Is your staff invigorated? Is your community group invigorated? Are you invigorated? Are you a leader worth following because who you are inspires and compels people to greatness they did not know they could attain to before they met you? That's the kind of leader God wants you to be. You're like, well, you don't know me, I'm a wallflower. Baloney. There are people who are in your life who look up to you, who love you, and who need someone to step up and act out in selfless courage, the kind of acts of righteousness that are so rare these days. And last fruit of great leadership, people are unleashed. People are unleashed. They're freed. They're freed to pursue greatness. They're freed from the oppression of evil. So what's the fruit of your leadership in the lives of those around you? Maybe it's your buddies at school or on a team. Oh, they don't look to me as a leader. Why not? Maybe it's time to change it. You'll never be a leader worth following until you learn to lead yourself. Just won't be. Stop waiting for something to happen to make you worth following. Start acting like a great leader now by leading the hardest person leading your family or in your life, which is you. Because nothing says more about you than how well you lead yourself. So, very simple question as we end here. What's your summer plan to get better? What's your summer plan to lead yourself? And here's where this is coming from as a burden I have for you as your pastor and fellow follower of Jesus is we're coming to summer months. And here's what I see happen all the time. It's people punch out, check out, pull back, and coast. How much glory has Jesus ever gotten from a people who are coasting? How much good has ever come from a people who are coasting? Newsflash, not much. The most extraordinary opportunities for temptation, for sin, for failure come when we're coasting. And so with everything I have in me as your pastor and your friend, I want to exhort you, whatever you do this summer, don't coast. Sure play, sure recreate, sure rest, sure go on vacation, totally. Sure stay up late and watch movies with your kids, absolutely. But whatever you do, don't coast. Meaning make a plan. I told our whole staff this 4 weeks ago. You need to come back from the summer better than you went into it. Because the kind of opportunities God's bringing us as a church are unprecedented. Which means we need to be postured in such a way as to respond to the work of God, not caught on our heels, living in fear, false prophesying over the future, and never acting in faith. And I say that, church, because I believe that God's calling us as Grace City into kinds of experiences that we couldn't wildly comprehend. If he showed us, we'd be like, no. Are you kidding me? Yes. That's for us if we would step into it. But don't check out this summer. What are you going to read? Who are you going to hang out with? Who are you going to love? Who are you going to serve? What are you going to do? How are you going to lead that guy, that gal in the mirror that if left leaderless will inevitably run down roads of destruction? So, I'm not going to even give you some ideas because I'm over time, and so I'm telling you to lead yourself and not telling you how. So there's your first act of leadership. Go figure it out. Sorry. How helpful is that? I don't know. I know it might be nebulous and generic. Here's my exhortation. Figure it out. Guys, you need to read some books this summer. I talk to guys all the time. What are you reading? Oh, last book I read was in high school. I'm like, congratulations, loser. I'm not a reader. Well, become one. Read some books. Read the Word of God. Get in a community. Find some friends. Get some different friends. Mix it up. I talk with one family. They're going to the lake today, and they're going to talk about their plan. We're going to make a plan, how to redeem the summer, not waste the summer, so that we become better, not more lethargic. We become sharper, not duller, so that we grow into the grace of God, not drift from the grace of God. How are you going to capitalize on your summer? So that individually we're all growing in our leadership capacity and experiences. We're all growing in grace and righteousness and holiness and patience and the character of Christ, so that as we collectively come back together again, and we're going to be together all summer, I get that, but people kind of, drift for the summer. And when we come back, and that's fine, rest, vacate, travel, great. But when we come back for the summer, what I don't want to have to do is regroup a gaggle of a bunch of folks that have been drifting for 8 weeks and are completely off the rails. You got 8 weeks left in the summer, and we're at Labor Day weekend. How are you going to show up at Labor Day weekend? That's not on me. That's on you. And so I'm just lovingly, graciously, humbly calling you. See, I'm gonna go on vacation this week. And while I'm gone, I'm like, well, what are they going to be doing while I'm gone? And there's this kind of fatherly sense of anxiety I have for being gone. And I got to give that to the Lord. And I'm not leaving. I'm coming back in a week, so it's not a big deal. I'm sure you'll be fine without me. You're like, been doing good without you for 40 years, bro. I'm sure we'll make it. I'm sure you will. But I won't get a chance to talk to you for a few weeks. And I just want to encourage you, don't waste your summer. No, you can. It's very easy to do. Very easy to do. Some of you might already be doing it. Redeem it, restore it, reclaim it. Lead yourself, and then those around you. And I guarantee you it'll be the greatest summer of your life. Read a book, hang out with some folks, meet some friends, make some friends, love some people, serve some people. Make a plan. Work the plan. Identify a couple things you should stop doing right now. Interesting, and I'll end with this. Interesting. People come into my office oftentimes, we'll talk, and they'll be like, oh, really hard. Okay, great. What's going on? Well, such and such and such and such and such. Like, oh, man, that is hard. Yeah, I know it is. What do you think the problem is? Well, so-and-so and such and such and such. Oh, yeah, I think you're right. What should you do about it? Well, I should probably such and such and so-and-so and so. Yeah, I think you're right. Half of counseling isn't telling people what they don't know. It's just putting a boot in the you-know-what to get them going. Now, sometimes they don't know what to do, and they're stuck, and so we work through that to help them see so they have courage. But here's the deal, folks. Most of you don't need me to write out a plan for your life. You can figure it out. You know what you should stop doing yesterday and start doing right now? You know better than I do. Talk with Jesus. Talk to the Holy Spirit. He'll talk to you. Talk to a friend. Talk to a spouse. Figure it out. Make a plan. And then live into it with faith and watch God show up. Which means the biggest leadership challenge you'll face this summer is not me or someone else or the circumstances in your life or your business or your job or your friends. It's you. And how will you respond? And here's the beauty of it. If all you do is look in the mirror, you won't make any progress. So take your eyes off your biggest leadership challenge, which is you, and turn your eyes to the greatest leadership example, which is Jesus. The one who was the most selfless and the most courageous and the most wise. Think of the restraining discretion of Jesus. It's staggering. The humility of Jesus, the graciousness of Jesus. The first step toward leading yourself is to get your eyes off yourself and to look to the Master and ask him for help and then buckle up, because the ride is going to be extraordinary. And so, Father, I'm praying for these dear, precious folks. I'm praying that you would encourage them and stir in them vision for what it would look like to lead themselves well. Father, before we look to lead others, would we look to you? Would we follow you, respond to you? And Lord, we're asking that you would give us a vision for even how we could spend this summer in a way that would be redemptive, that we would come out the other end of the summer not exhausted and weary and but that we would come out of the summer hope-filled, faith-filled, a soul that's rested, a heart that's full, a faith that's strong, a vision that's clear, or that we might posture ourselves in such a way as to be prepared for and ready for the opportunities that you would bring. And that if you would choose to grant more influence or more authority or a greater voice in our community and valley and beyond, Lord, that the legs of our character would be ready for it and hold the weight and carry the weight and not snap under the weight. And so, Father, for every father in this room and husband in this room, I pray that you would give them vision for what it might look like for them to lead themselves and then their family with purpose this summer. Father, for every wife and mother, Lord, give her vision. For every student and child in the room, give them vision of what it would look like for them to lead themselves well. Whether their parents require it or not, whether their parents encourage it or not, I'm not going to wait to be led. I'm going to lead myself towards Jesus. And Father, would you be pleased to answer our questions and respond to our requests for wisdom and help when we ask for it. We're grateful, Father, that you give us such wonderful examples in Esther of what it can look like to start out completely failing and then by God's grace be transformed to not a compromising leader but into a great leader. And that's our heart, Father. We want to be transformed into great leaders who lead people to the greatest leader, Jesus Christ. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.